Okay, let's share our screen. Oh, and share sound. I'm going to play audio. Okay. Omagyanantimirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurminachanjena tasmai shri guruve namaha. Dandavat pranams. Welcome everyone to our weekly Bhagavad Gita study group. And we are in chapter 16. Don't remember exactly where we left off. I think I'm going to pick up. I remember going through 18. So I think I'll pick up there. So this chapter, some heavy content, be prepared, godly and ungodly natures. And as I did mention, I believe in our meeting last week, this is not the be all and end all, fortunately, of the cultivation of bhakti. But it's like a kind of a helpful reference point. And in general, we are trying to follow the godly way of being, right? The sattvic way of being. But ultimately, devotion, bhakti is everything. So we don't have to worry too much about all these comments of being thrown into hell and so on. That's not really our program. Yeah, I remember going through 18. So let's just listen to our Guru Dev chanting the whole of from the beginning. It's a short chapter anyway. We can just skim through the verses from the beginning of the chapter. We're going to listen to our Guru Dev. So this is so we want 16. Here we are.
Surasudhaya Daivasura Sampad Vibhaga Yoga Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Abhayang Satya Sangshuddhi Jnana Yoga Bhavasthiti Danang Damascha Jagascha Sadhaya Staparjavam Ahimsa Sattamakrudhas Tyaga Shantirapaisuram Daya Bhute Saludang Margavang Sri Hri Rachapalam Teja Khama Dhriti Shaucha Madruha Natimanita Bhavanti Sampadang Devi Mabhijatasya Bharata Dambho Darpo Bhimanascha Krodha Parushyamevacha Ajnanamichabhijatasya Partha Sampadamasurim Devi Sampad Vimokhaya Nibandhaya Srimata Masucha Sampadang Daivi Mabhijatushi Pandava Daubhuta Sargau Lokesmin Daiva Asura Evacha Daivota Vistarasa Proktang Asurang Partha Me Srinu Pravrittincha Nivrittincha Janana Vidurasura Na Sauchang Napi Chacharo Na Sattang Teshu Viddate Asattam Apratishthante Jagadahuranishwaram Aparaspara Sambhutam Kimannat Kama Hetukam Etang Drishtim Avastabhya Nastatmanul Pabuddhaya Prabhavantu Grakarmana Khayaya Jagatu Hita Kamamasrita Duspurang Dambha Mana Madanita Mohad Grihita Sadgrahan Pravartante Shibrataha Chintama Parimeyancha Pralayanta Mupasritaha Kamupabhoga Parama Etavad iti nischita Athapasa Satervadha Kama Krodha Parayanaha Ihanti Kama Bhogartham Annayinartha Sanchayan Idam Mudya Maya Labdham Idam Prapshe Manoratham Idam Asti Damopi Me Bhavishyanti Punardhanam Aso Maya Hata Shatrur Hanishe Chaparanapi Ishwaroha Mahang Bhogi सिद्धोहं बलवान सुखी अड्ढोभिजानवानस्मि कन्योस्ति सदृशो मया यक्षे दस्यामि मोदिष्य इत्तज्ञान विमोहिता अनेक चित्त विभ्रांता मोहजाल समावृता प्रसक्ता काम भोगेषु पतन्ति नरकेषु च आत्मसंभाविता स्तब्धा धनमान मदान्विता जजन्ते नाम यज्ञैस्ते दम्भेना विधिपूर्वकम् अहंकारं बलं दर्पं कामं क्रोधं च संस्थिता मामात्मपरदेहेषु प्रद्विषन्तो भसूचका तानहं द्विषतः क्रूरान् संघरेषु नराधमान् क्षिप्तं मजस्रमशुभान्
Sorry,
आसुरीषेव योनिषु आसुरीं जनिमापन्ना मूढ़ा जन्मनि जन्मनि मामा प्राप्यैव कौन्तेय ततो जान्तधमाङ्गतिं त्रिविधं नरकस्येदं दारं नाशनमात्मनः काम क्रोधस्तथा लोभस्तस्मादेतत्त्रयं त्यजेत् एतैर्विमुक्त कौन्तेय तमोद्दारो स्त्रीभिर्नरः आचरत्यात्मनः श्रेयस्ततो जाति पराङ्गतिम् शास्त्र विधिमुत्सृज्य वर्तते कामचारतः न स सिद्धिमवाप्नोति न सुखं न पराङ्गतिम् तस्मात् शास्त्रं प्रमाणन्ते कार्याकार्यव्यवस्थितो ज्ञात्वा शास्त्रविधानोक्तं कर्म कर्तुमिहार्हसि इति श्रीमहाभारते शतसाहस्रां संहितायां वैयासिकां भीष्मपर्वणि श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु ब्रह्म विद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुन संवादे दैवासुर संपद विभाग योग नाम षोडशोऽध्यायः.
Okay, so we got to the end of the chapter. Some pretty heavy statements there. So let's chant from verse 18 to the end of the chapter. Let's chant together. Ahankaram balam darpam kamam krodhan cha samshitaha mamatma paradeheshu pradvishanto vyasuyakaha tanaham dvishata krodhan samsadeshu naradaman Shikam yajashamashubam ashadisheva yonishu asudim yonamapana Buddha janmani janmani mama prapyaiva kunteya tato yantyadamam gatim Chuvidam nadakasyedam vadam nashanamatmanaha kama krodastata lobas tasmare tachayam trajet Nitya mukta kunteya tamodarai sribirnaraha achadatyatmana shreyat tato yati param gatim yashascha vidimuchijya vartate kamacharataha natsa siddhim avapnoti nasukam na param gatim asmak shastram pramanam te karya karya vyavastito Yatva Shastra Vidanoktam Karma Kartam Harhasi. I'm going to skip that last one there. Steve, do you want to read those translations from 18 to the end?
Can people hear me? Because it would be going through your computer.
You're a little loud.
Okay. Given to egoism, I see what you wanted me to read. Given to egoism, pomp and power, lust and anger, they are resentful of me, who am situated in their own and others' bodies as the super soul, and they ascribe faults to the good qualities of the saintly persons. I continually cast these resentful, cruel, inauspicious, and decadent persons into the demoniac species in the cycle of birth and death. O Kontea, repeatedly taking birth in the demoniac species, these deluded persons cannot come to me. and they descend to lower and lower planes. Lust, anger, and greed are the three doors of hell, leading to self-destruction, so they must be abandoned. O Kantia, one who is liberated from these three doors of darkness strives for the benefit of the soul, by which he attains the supreme destination. One who acts according to his own desires, disregarding the spiritual injunctions, cannot attain perfection, happiness, or the supreme destination. Therefore, the scriptural injunctions for duty and non-duty are your authority. Knowing your duty in this world according to the scriptures, to act only for the Lord's pleasure, you should act accordingly.
Okay. All right. So some heavy verses here. And welcome to those of you who joined a little late, especially Suvasini Didi. We're always so happy when you can join us. And also there were one or two others who also came. Well, let's open the forum. Any thoughts from our group here on these verses? Any reflections?
I have a question,
my
Didi.
reflection is,
You go first, Didi. You go. No, you go, Chintamani. Go.
Let's stop our share in a moment. So who's
I'm having speaker problems, so you go.
Okay. There's that one verse, and it was saying, and I wish I had a book and I could say it. And it says that, the jiva that has these problems go to the deepest hell. And do you see that?
I mean, I think we're gonna have a really fun conversation today.
Am I correct? I heard that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so therefore, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so because that's one of the things that when I was a very young girl that attracted me to Krishna consciousness, because I was on a different path, going for a different type of renunciation at that time in my life. It's going to be a nun. Anyway, and that there was no hell and damnation, that every jiva has a chance, so I can understand that, yes, in this life the way it depends on how we live our life, we might go back into the samsara, go back down to the lowest species and have to climb back up again. But is that what it's referring to? Like just going back down into the lower species and climbing back, or forever being in that position? I don't, I'm thinking.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing this it's exactly what I wanted to hear. And anyone want to share any thoughts on this before I go into it? Jaya Dave, love to hear from you.
Let's see. Can you hear me? We're on like a speaker.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Immediately, a few different things. In reading Srimad Bhagavatam, somewhere in there it was talking about the hell realms as worlds, but also subtle temporary states. There's the bardo kind of where you'll go into hell realms in between lifetimes and then come out and reincarnate as a human again. There's that whole dimension of the hellish planets. And then there's a whole idea that's very different in the Vedic timeline of eternality and infinity and cyclical time. So there is no permanent hell, except for maybe an entity that continually chooses that, but it's always a choice. And so the hellish planets are not forever. They are, heavenly planets are not forever. Hellish planets are not forever. And then in those different realms, time moves differently. I'd be curious about time in the hellish realms because of the density of vibration. It actually might move more quickly. Whereas in the heavenly planets, life is very long, very expansive and all of that. As far as on the Vedic timeline, I'm not sure how the hellish planets work, but they are extended, extreme, exaggerated correctional phases that the soul goes through that are not forever. They're correctional phases. And when you go to the hellish planets, you actually burn off karma and rise up from the hell experience, because extreme suffering is actually purifying. And so in that sense, I don't like the way that the word punishment is used. I think that's left over from Christianity, but I like the correctional, or what was it, like dunda. Dunda is not just a punishment, it's like correcting. So the hellish planets are correctional planes of existence that you pass through, and you don't have to stay there. It's not eternal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for that, because that was my understanding also. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for sharing some interesting thoughts there from Jayadev. And I see Marie is patiently raising her hand in the virtual world.
Yeah, I'm going to be less literal now, and say that as somebody who kind of has an addiction to like resentment, like when you're caught in resentment, you can't take responsibility for anything. And if you can't take responsibility for anything, you can't make anything better. And that is hell. It's an emotional state as well. So even just from that definition, there's truth there, because if you get resentful enough and you get caught there enough, you don't need any other hell. You don't need any other planets. You don't need, like, that's already hell.
Mm-hmm.
To be stuck and not be able to get someplace better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like what you've expressed is a very advanced conception, actually. And like sometimes our Guru Dev, like for example, I remember once somebody they shared something Guru Dev had said, which had really shocked them. Like it was someone who had been living a life of exclusive service, dedication, and they left like for marriage life. And our Guru Dev, he made some comment about them. He was disappointed they were taking themselves to hellish life, something like that. And the person who repeated this to me, they took it that our Guru Dev was saying like, oh, they're going to burn in hell, they're going to suffer. But that wasn't at all what I took from it. From his perspective, it was more what you're saying, that they're like entering into the pleasures of the body. That's like a type of hell, like from where he's standing, entering the world of the senses, like that's already hell. You don't need any other punishment. No. So I really appreciate what you've expressed, because that's a very mature, more advanced understanding of what suffering is. Real suffering, as acknowledged by advanced Vaishnavas, is just to be living in lack of Krishna consciousness. To be for the real Vaishnava, mundane suffering and pleasure is all hell. It's all on the same platform. So I really appreciate that you brought up that angle, Marie. And Sue Devi also has her hand raised. I'm so excited I knew this is gonna get everyone talking today.
I also resonate with Jayadev and Marie, and I think ultimately everything is grace of the Lord. And so no matter where we are on what my understanding is, no matter where we are on what planetary system, whether that's in this lifetime or the next, the grace of the Lord is always coming and is always teaching us how to, there's always the opportunity to learn how to come more into the heart, and how to serve, and how to progress in the world. And I think the hellish condition or the deep levels of suffering come from the planes of exploitation. And so long as we're living in the plane of exploitation, so long as we're self-serving from the environment to feed the ego in some way, shape, or form, it's going to bind us into these heavier, denser states of consciousness that blocking us and from progressing into any path of consciousness, and then of course into the path of offering the heart in service.
Beautiful, beautiful, Sudevi. You wouldn't believe Sudevi's only been a year in this. I mean, she speaks with more realization than many who've been practicing for many years. Beautiful. And I saw Gangalila also had her hand raised, but now it's gone.
Yeah, because Devi really put it very, very beautifully. And I just wanted to see, I mean, I can't wait what you are going to also offer us to unpack it even further. But also, I'm seeing that the planetary reality is really only another way to describe the state of my consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Nice, nice, very nice.
I have a question, Didi. I mean, I'm listening to these devotees, and I understand what they're saying, how it's a state of mind within our body that we have now. But I'm wondering if the verse is talking about as we leave this body into another life. As I'm looking at the different planetary systems on my wall, from lower planetary systems to Vaikuntha, the highest, and we are in the middle. So is that what it's talking about, that we just go through that all the way down to the lowest planetary system, or do we stay here and start from the samsara all over again? Because that is there, the samsara, to have to start. Everybody is not a guaranteed human life in the next life. You have to do some type of that's one thing. That's one beautiful thing about Krishna consciousness, and one thing we really owe to our spiritual masters that have come and paved the way and showed us the way and helped us, is that if we follow the path and we chant, especially chanting in itself is so cleansing to the heart, that on our next life it's going to always be an upgrade. We might be able to go back straight to Krishna Loka, but maybe we're not. But even if we can't, we have an upgrade. We're able to continue our devotional service. Anyway, that's
okay. Well, I'll share what I have in my little basket here. And thank you for those comments, Radhana Rupini. And the first thing we have to remember is that, and this is something our Gurudev has pointed out, is that Bhagavad Gita is not always, and not just not always, but often, or a lot of the time, perhaps 50% of the time or more, it's not talking to the Shuddha Bhakta practitioners, those in the lines of Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion. There are different conversations happening in Bhagavad Gita, and they're not all relevant to those who are actually practicing Krishna consciousness. Bhagavad Gita is starting at a very basic level, principle, just don't be selfish. Like for someone actually seriously engaged in the practice of devotion, that's not even a point. Like, if you brought that up in a room of Krishna Bhaktas, there would just be an awkward silence. Like, yeah, we talked about that in kindergarten. So the conversation in Bhagavad Gita, it's not always relevant for those engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness. That's something that we have to bear in mind. And another thing is that, overall in the approach of the Vedas is that it's a very wide net, right, that's being cast. And there's different instructions, different statements that are targeted at persons of different mentalities, right? So this whole conception, whenever you see the word punishment or hell mentioned, then you understand that's being directed at persons of a lower nature. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he speaks about those 4 motivations behind every action, the lowest of which is fear, right? For the lowest minded person, that's the only way you can stop them from, murder and thieving and so on, right? You're going to get in trouble if you don't, right? It's a basic instruction. It's not relevant for someone who's entered into a life of love and integrity, and self accountability and all of these higher notions. So that's one point. And so like this whole chapter 16, it's actually speaking to persons who are living a life separate from the center, right? Because our whole mundane existence is based on that principle, on that premise, right? That we've turned away and we're living our own lives, independent of the absolute, independent of the supreme center. So it's saying like, this is what you get if you live, if you're living a life separately from the Lord, if you behave like this, you'll get this. If you behave like that, you'll get that. Like kind of like making the best of a bad bargain. This is who we're talking to. This is the level that they're at, right? And another thing is that, and this is something also indicated earlier in Bhagavad Gita, and we've heard our Param Guru Maharaj Srila Sridhar Maharaj speak about this very clearly, that at the time of departure from the body, at the time of one's passing, souls are in different categories, right? So souls who are living a life separate from the central flow, they are judged in a sense of justice, right, wrong, good karma, bad karma, right? They are subject to that type. They'll have to enter the court of Yamaraj, right? However, Srila Sridhar Maharaj states clearly that souls who have some connection with the line of Shuddha Bhakti, the line of pure devotion, they've taken shelter of Guru, and they're in that culture. They're entering it, trying to approach the fundamental absolute flow of everything. They are not in that category. And whatever is decided for them, that comes from a higher layer. There's Maya and there's Yoga Maya. So they're in the camp of Yoga Maya. And this is mentioned earlier in Bhagavad Gita too, right? When Arjuna asks Krishna, like, what happens if someone gives up their mundane duty, to approach the Lord, and they fall down midway? What happens to them, right? I mean, what are the chances of us actually realizing this in this lifetime, right? Very, very little. It is such a high thing. So Arjuna's asked a very good question, like, what happens if we don't make it in this lifetime? We fall down halfway. And Krishna says, don't worry. I will arrange the suitable circumstances for them to pick up from where they left off. I'll make sure that they're born in a family and an environment that will support their continued culture, continued practice of Krishna consciousness. So that reassurance is given to us. And so their judgment, so to speak, that's coming from a higher quarter. They're not part of the normal as a judgment or the plane of justice as generally souls are in this world. So this concern with hell and all these things, that's not the conversation. What we want to focus on more is wholesale, loving heart approach to the Lord, coming, approaching the Lord, approaching the Vaishnavas, approaching all these practices with a mood of affection, with a mood of sincerity. We want to give our heart to this. We want to give our whole existence to this. That's what we're concerned with. And this type of fear of getting it wrong or being punished, that's not relevant for us at all. So this chapter, I would say it's not directly relevant for us, but it's many of these sections of Bhagavad Gita, they're like a helpful reference point, kind of like laying out the map. So a lot of these sections just like, okay, let's go on to the next chapter. Madhura Priya has her hand raised.
Oh, I was just also thinking that we've been told that our connection with our Srila Gurudev is extends like to our whole family, to our brothers and sisters, our fathers and our mothers, and that it descends to include them. Because I've heard so many times people say, "Oh, your family is really lucky; they don't even know like what's being offered to them, or what mercy they might have from Gurudev because of the connection that the aspiring devotee is making." And then I was also thinking about how, knowing all this, how important it is to really to live the regulations, because that's something that Gurudev has to digest, our inappropriateness, or our um let's say eating fish or whatever you want to do. Like if you don't want to follow the regulations, Gurudev has to digest that for you, because he is taking care of this. He is taking care of us on this plane. And to not to take those actions so unseriously, thinking, oh, it's okay for me, because really you're giving that to your guru. Like you're giving that bad behavior to your guru to digest. And that's really heavy to think about. I don't know if I'm wrong or right, but those are the two things I was thinking.
Yeah, no, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah, we also have to remember, as Madhura Priya is pointing out, right, that as long as we're still acting in this, we don't want to think, the other end of the spectrum is to think we're totally beyond all these things, right? But as long as we're still acting within the plane of selfishness, then we're still in the world of karma. And okay, we may be excused from some things, but there are still consequences, right? And we still have to face certain things. And yeah, why do we want to give more for our guru to deal with? Let's make his load a little lighter. So I appreciate that angle. And we have a beautiful group today. And welcome to those of you who came a little later, Ramananda Prabhu and Ananda Krishna Prabhu. And I think there were a couple others as well. Anyone else want to add any thoughts to this conversation? How are we doing for time?
I
Okay.
just had a question, Diddy.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, because I've heard you mention before, there's different ways in which people learn, or different ways in which souls can be reached. Like some souls need this element of fear, some souls it's the element of duty, others is something else, and others it's like it's because they love. And so I noticed in a lot of the texts that there is an element of fear in some, like in this one, maybe I don't remember exactly the words, but like, talking about going to hell, and can have, some things can have this lens of fear. And I don't know what my question was exactly, but I'm wondering if that is always necessary. Like if even those souls that are like in such a conditioned state, that duty may, or say some of the other lower things like duty or whatever, may not be able to reach them. Do you think it's possible for like love to be ignited in them, and to motivate them on the path, or is it have to be at that kind of lower vibration in order to reach the consciousness that they're in?
I believe that if they meet a Vaishnava, of a particular caliber, then definitely, that's the power of the Vaishnava. They can awaken, they can draw out, they can penetrate all those layers, right? Just like we hear how Mahaprabhu could inspire the animals of the Jharikhanda forest to chant and dance and embrace one another in kirtan. Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained that really beautifully, like, because his potency, the vibration of his chanting was so fine, it could penetrate all the layers of misconception. So I believe, this is the power of the pure devotee, the power of the Vaishnava. And someone may also act as a vessel of that. I believe that too. And that can inspire that. that can awaken that. That's what we saw with our Guru Day. And another thing is, you know, that, I mean, like, okay, there are some, in some places, there are some statements about hell and stuff, but I mean, like in my world, I don't really see that. And maybe that's because I was raised in the conception of Srila Govinda Maharaj and Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and you know, and I love Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Charitamrita is dealing with the essence. There's hardly any mention of that kind of stuff there. Maybe one or two small mentions of something like that. I can't even think of anything right now that's there. No, so in the higher conversation about this, there isn't any mention of this actually.
There's the one story of Mahaprabhu telling someone to go jump in the river because he said he went to the house to beg for the rice from a woman that was chased.
Okay, Choto Haridas. Okay, you're not helping me here.
But
Okay,
that's why
that's maybe the only example.
Isn't that why Nityananda exists, though, to give that mercy beyond what Mahaprabhu is extending? It's like a cooperation with a partnership of both Nityananda and Mahaprabhu to bring mercy.
That's also
to
true.
devotees.
But you know, that whole pastime with Chota Haridas, it has to be discussed in context and with the fine print and everything, you know. And that's maybe like the only place where you find that type of heaviness in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And yes, you're right. The mercy of Nityananda is always there. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe persons who are coming from a different like spiritual background, you know, some of these things may jump out more, you know, but for, I mean, like, as I said, someone like myself, my experience in Krishna consciousness from the beginning has been very different. And for me, that's never been a part of the conversation. It's never been anything relevant. So yeah. And Scarlett has her, but thanks for bringing that up, Devi. That's a really nice point that you brought up. Scarlett has her hand raised.
Hare Krishna, thank you very, very much for today's class. What about I know so many places in Bhagavad Gita I have read about the controller, that Lord Krishna is the controller, ultimate controller. And I wonder, because I know some people, they have difficulty for some habit they have. For example, they like very much sweets and they can't stop it. They like to drink coffee, they can't stop it, or they drink, they can't stop it. That kind of, you call the addiction like a sickness. It's some kind of sickness, and they really, I at least I can say two of them I know very, very well, and I know they really, really, really wants to stop doing it, but they have so much difficulty with it. So I wonder, could it be because it's not time for them to have control over their senses? Maybe next lifetime. Maybe it's not time this lifetime, but next lifetime.
Well, I mean, one thing we have to remember is that the goal is not to achieve sense control. Right? That's not the goal. You know, the goal is Krishna Bhakti. You know, the goal is devotion to Krishna. And all of these things, they're like, you know, Srila Rupa Goswami compares them to coverings, right? These tendencies for enjoyment. And because, you know, like sense enjoyment, what's the other side of the coin? Sense control. But they're considered to be two sides of the same coin, right? We're not interested in either, actually, to be totally free of the senses and to be focused on that, or to be madly engaged in the senses. Like, we're not interested in neither of those things are helpful. To be focused too much on controlling the senses or to be focused on enjoying the sense, neither of those things are what we're interested in. Krishna doesn't care, actually. Krishna wants to look at the devotion that's in our heart. And as that is arising, those layers, they'll naturally leave us. Those anartas, right? Those attachments, those bad habits, they'll naturally leave us. It doesn't mean that we just let it all go to hell and do whatever we want. We try to put some level of restraint, but ultimately it's something that will just naturally come as a side effect, right? And our Gurudev, I heard him express it this way, that on one occasion, that we shouldn't try to control the senses in a forceful way. He said a pushing way. And he said, but through Shravan and Kirtan, right, through hearing and chanting, that will naturally come about. So I feel it's not something that we want to focus on too much, and we don't want to judge others or judge ourselves too much about that. Someone may not have any addictions, not have any bad habits, but is their heart melted in love for Krishna? Like when they chant the holy name of Krishna, do the hairs of their body stand on end? Are they full of love and compassion for all souls? Are they free from all spirit of envy? Right. And then on the other hand, someone may have utterly uncontrolled senses, but they may have a real drop of the real thing. Right? And it's just a matter of time before all those things leave them. So we got to keep the big picture in mind when we're getting into this. The mind is because we're finite, and the mind is finite. The material energy likes limitation, right? The material, one meaning of Maya is measurements, to measure. So the mind has this tendency like to focus in on these tiny little things, and we lose the big picture. So we have to keep that big picture in mind when we are looking at sincere practitioners of Krishna consciousness, and when we're reflecting on ourselves. Keep that big picture in mind, and remember what the real goal of all of this is. And we don't know who's going. Our Gurudev made this point once, like who's going up, who's going down. We don't know, actually. We don't have that vision. So we will be careful when we will be careful when we are observing the Vaishnavas getting into a spirit of judgment, and like whatever we can see with our empiric senses, we can't trust that. We have to doubt that, right? We're interested in the culture of faith. That's a different substance. That's something else. We can't see that with these fleshy eyes, and with our mind, we can't assess that with our powers of mental discrimination and whatever. We don't have, it's a different substance. We can't measure it that by those units of measurement. So we're just careful, right? Try to on the other hand, try to appreciate, try to see the emerging spirit of devotion, and try to support those persons to pull that out, to inspire that out, focus on that. So those are my thoughts on that.
I try. I have distributed book to them, to person that I'm talking about, and I try to talk to them, and they read. They already say that because in all the spiritual and religion says that you shouldn't drink coffee, you shouldn't drink beer, you shouldn't eat meat. Meat, I don't care, she says, but I have difficulty with coffee. I have difficulty. My very, very bad things is I can't stop drinking coffee. It's impossible for me. So then it means I'm doomed. That's what she says. And I tell her, no, it's not like that. You have to read it first, and you will understand it's not like that. But at the same time, myself, I have read in Bhagavad Gita, and I know I have read in many places that where Lord Krishna says, ultimately, I am the controller. I control everything. Nothing happens without my sanctioning. So that's why I wonder, is it because of that, or because of, for instance, maybe for some people, doesn't matter who, me or them, doesn't matter, but it's not time this time around to achieve that goal, but maybe next life or life that thereafter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a nice point here. First of all, I don't think drinking coffee is such a big deal. And yes, it is true. The Lord's control is always in the background of everything. And, you know, this is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. There's this famous verse, right? This Mama Maya Duratya, right? Where Krishna is saying, it's actually through surrender that we will transcend all of these things. That, what is it? The Mam eva ye prapadyante mayame tam jaranti te. You know, Krishna is saying that this Maya, Mama Maya, this Maya of mine is impossible, very difficult to overcome her. Persons may do it through their own efforts. Persons may be able to do it temporarily for some period of time, but on a permanent basis, it's actually not possible. So Krishna is telling us here, like, first of all, Mama Maya is my Maya. Like, she works for me. She's not an independent agent. And Mam eva ye prapadyante mayame tam tarante. Through surrendering to me, well, then Maya will leave you. So it's really through Sharanagati. It's when we say, you know, in the Matrix, the blue pill and the red pill, which is the one for like the truth, reality. I don't know, don't remember. Let's say
Red.
the red. Okay, when you say you want the red pill, then that cover will leave you. That's what Sharanagati is, right? Because otherwise it's like we want to be deceived. So Maya is actually helping us. Krishna is helping us, right? We want to live in an illusion that we're at the center of everything. That's what this actually is if you deconstruct all of it. Like we want to believe we're in the center to a greater or lesser degree. So Krishna always gives us what we want. So Maya is helping us, right? And then of course, you know, there has to be some there's like karma and some suffering involved, because there has to be some regulating principle. Otherwise it'll just be total madness, right? Everyone can't be the king of the world all the time, right?
Like even like you can be a murderer.
There's another example. Exactly. You can't let things get too out of control. So then you have things like consequences, karma, right? Some suffering. And then there's some level of order. Law is a symptom of a lack of love, actually. Law is a symptom of selfishness. When there's a need to enforce law and order and morality, that's just a symptom of a lack of love and a prevalence of selfishness, right? So that's why we need things like karma in this world. But when we sign up for the real picture, no, I want to have it all. I want to sign up for reality. Unfortunately, it's a beautiful reality. It's not the dark matrix reality. Thank goodness for that. Then when we sign up for that, then we don't need Maya anymore. So then Maya will leave us. That's actually what this is. When you just pull it apart, you dissect it all. That's what it is.
Is there some reference in Revealed Truth about like smoking? Maybe there's a question asked about smoking pot, and Srila, I'm not saying as an excuse, but Srila Sridhar said this is minor.
Maybe you search for Shri Krishna.
It's somewhere.
Yeah, that's a comment that gets blown out of proportion sometimes. he's saying like compared to other things, it's a small thing to give up, you know. And he mentions Kanak, Kamini, and Pratishta. These are the three most difficult things to overcome, you know, attraction for wealth, the pleasure of the senses, and Pratishta, name and fame. Okay, Radhana Rupini has her hand raised. I loved how excited our group is getting today.
From my limited knowledge, I know that once aspiring devotee takes a spiritual master and the spiritual master accepts that aspiring devotee, there are vows made, and those vows connect them to their spiritual master. Okay, and so those vows are for them, and they have to follow those vows. But in regards to having friends in the public or meeting people, I find in my own life, what I tend to do is just be friendly with people. I'm just their friend, and I never really push anything or mention anything, and until they start asking me, hey, wait a minute, I noticed you don't eat meat. And then they'll start asking me questions, why? Or, hey, can you teach me how to do this? Or, and if one friend somehow or another really wants to know about Krishna consciousness, then we really get into it. But I always just give small doses, because sometimes it's very hard for people to take a large dose, you know. But we have to remember that the vows we made are for us. You know, if somebody hasn't made those vows, they don't have to do it, you know. In fact, I have a good friend who is a devotee. She made vows to her spiritual master, and she married a non-devotee who doesn't follow any of the principles. And she was complaining to me that he doesn't follow any of the principles. And I said, well, he didn't make a vow to anyone to follow. Why are you, you know, it's okay. Just let him be, you know. And one day he'll, by watching you, by your kindness, by your sweetness, he might start inquiring. So it's like, we have to be, you know, like I think Srila Prabhupada said, harder on ourselves and soft with others.
Mm.
Yeah.
That was a really beautiful share, Radhana Rupini, and I love that. I love that mood and that approach. And I appreciate too, you know, this emphasis on the personal relationship with Guru. You know, like in regards to chanting, the fact that our Guru asked us to chant is probably more significant than anything else. Like, you know, when we're chanting, when we're rolling those beads, like at this point, we're not able to vibrate the pure name. But the fact that we're following our Guru's instruction to do that, that's what's actually meaningful, right? That's what's adding a living element to the whole thing. So like our Gurudev mentioned, you know, that was one reason why he didn't like to ask people to chant too many rounds, because he said, then they're breaking their promise to their Guru, and that's very bad for their spiritual life. You know, if they can't follow that, you know. So I really appreciate that you brought that up. And even
And Didi, I was also thinking one last thing, and it even goes further now that 50 years has passed since A.C. Bhaktivedanta has come to the earth, and there's so many other pure devotees that have come, and like your Govinda Maharaj, and you know, enlightening and enlivening others and giving them initiation, and other people too. That I find that what I had vowed with my spiritual master, the vows that he made me take with him, are personal, and whether in the number of rounds or as far as my Gayatri mantra, he gave me the first mantra. I am not going to change that. Whereas others may give a slightly different Gayatri or a different way, or say, okay, another spiritual master, it's a pure devotee too, might say, okay, you can just go ahead and do the X amount, like 4 rounds or whatever it is. And that's a personal thing. That's a personal thing between a spiritual master and his disciple. And it's not like for everybody. And we shouldn't be comparing with each other. It's like what we're given is so personal, and I don't know how to explain, and my words are not so good, but and yet
Words are beautiful.
it's not to be like a war. It's I'm not going to go to someone and say, hey, what did your spiritual master give you? Oh, that's wrong. No, that's not wrong. That's correct, because he's your spiritual master, and that's your connection to Krishna, and that's what you needed. And we're all different. We're all given what we need. Anyway, so
That's
it's
beautiful.
I honor all the pure devotees in the world.
Spirit, and yeah, it's a good remedy for what we do encounter sometimes. How many rounds do you chant? How many rounds do you chant? What did your guru ask you? And there's this judgment.
No judgment. Should be no judgment, because that is personal. Just like a mother, I have 4 children, and each of them I would give a different instruction about eating. Maybe one eats too much, so I'll tell them to eat a little less, or one doesn't eat enough vegetables, or one eats too much sweet, so I have to, it's different. But my as a mother, my whole thing is I just want all of them to be nourished properly. But each of them needs a different instruction, a personal instruction. And it's not to be shared.
And that is something that we saw with our Gurudev, that he would give 4 rounds to some, and he would give 16 rounds to others. So that's definitely something that our Gurudev demonstrated. Well, what a beautiful meeting we've had. I love all the reflections that have come out. Any last comments from anyone before we close for today?
Yeah, I have one little share, because I think for me, it was also from my former spiritual training. There was a little bit of this hellish pressure of like, you can't do that, because if you still do that. So I still ran this whole like coffee drinking. And this Govinda Mela, I really got the mood of, I think, what I've been just hearing in today's verse was this whole, the mood is not about not doing it and repressing and disciplining and being hardcore or overdoing it. It was just like, you do it or you don't. It's just really, the mood was so incredible. It was actually, now looking back, a huge lesson for me. It's like I could have my coffee, it's not a big deal. It was incredible. I don't know how to say, but for me, it shifted my mood about how to go on about anything I try too hard to either repress. And you said that so nicely, Vishaka. It really means so much to me to hear that, and in many different kinds of words, that we don't want to focus on too much discipline. We don't want to look at it too much, to either restrain or indulge. And that was the mood I found myself diving into, and it was represented by other people also having a way about doing it. It's new for me to do it that way, and I feel like now there is a chance that things may fall away because I just don't focus on such a grip.
I just want to
So-
clarify, I have never said anything to this person, never stop it or do that. Or she herself said it, that she feels that she doesn't have control, and maybe she never can be a good devotee or practice the spirituality and so on. I have never tell anyone in my life, do this, do that. If you don't do this, never. Who am I to say it? But she herself, that's why I wonder if it has to do with what Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that ultimately everything is under my control. So that's why I asked, could it be because it's not her time? Maybe that's why she's feeling that way. Not that I'm judging her or I'm thinking anything about it. I just wonder. That's why I mentioned it.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yes, we understand, Scarlett. Thank you for clarifying. And Madhura Priya also wants to.
Well, I'm
say
just
something.
thinking
Yeah.
if Krishna, we know Krishna is the controller, but maybe just surrender to that supreme personality of Godhead and actually pray and say, if it's bothering you, please take this away from me. Take this addiction away from me. Control. Like it's okay to. I don't think that's too much to pray to God to come and control my in a like something that's bothering me so much that I'm separating myself from God actually by trying to criticize myself, feel less about myself because I have this one addiction to caffeine, but rather to pray to him to remove this so-called addiction.
That's beautiful. That's another thing. Offer it all up. You know, it's his responsibility. You know, I brought myself to him. Now it's his problem. No, you, Krishna, you please, you help me with this. You know, and if he doesn't want to help us with it, that's okay too. We carry on, struggle on. We don't have anywhere else to go.
pray to Hrishikesh.
Jai, master of the senses. We have some nice comments here from Marie and others in our chat. I like this. We are all spiritual IEPs, individualized education plans. Nice. Okay, well maybe we'll sign off there. And also this is another nice one from Marie. There's don't know if we can get through all of it. This is a nice one. It's not that overcoming addictions leads to spiritual progress as much as spiritual progress leads to the undoing of addictions. Beautiful. Very nice. Okay, let's close on that thought for today. Steve, any words?
I'm just thank you, Dee, for today's talk. There was definitely some, it's a subject that we've probably all come across in our, at least growing up in the Western world, it would seem. So I just want to thank you for having in good words and everyone else for having good words. Very helpful class today. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Also, Steve is gonna come forward with a new name for the Zoom classes, and we're gonna start referring to him as Bhakta Steve.
Okay.
Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri
Jai.
Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. Shri
Jai.
Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Devotees, sincere seekers ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai. Jai Gaur Premanand.
Hari Hari Bo. Vishaka Didi ki Jai. Jai.
Hey.
Thank you very much for today.
Jai.
Thank you for your association, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Didi.
Great class.